ideas. What the hell is wrong with you? What the hell is wrong with you?
Hey, good evening, everybody. Happy New Year. Welcome to another edition of Ryno's Rants as the Minnesota Vikings controlled their destiny for the playoffs for a grand total of about 4 hours yesterday afternoon. The Pittsburgh Steelers did us a favor and took out the Seattle Seahawks in the late game yesterday afternoon, allowing the Vikings to control their destiny. All they had to do was beat Green Bay and then beat Detroit next week, and they were in the playoffs. And they promptly came out on Sunday Night Football in front of a national audience and completely shit the bed. Hey, Doc, good evening, good afternoon. Hope everybody has had a happy New Year as far as you can. That's not football related anyway. But yeah, it was a very Vikings thing to happen last night. I don't understand why every time this team has an opportunity to grab at something, the brass ring, and go for it and control it themselves and not have to worry about anybody else, they go out and they do this. Good evening, James. Like I said, everybody wanted to see Jaren Hall start the game last night because we needed to see what we have in Jaren Hall. We need this, da-da-da-da-da. Is Jaren Hall the answer for next year, so on and so forth? Well, this is another prime example of the old adage, be careful what you wish for, because Jaren Hall looked absolutely overwhelmed, did not look like he belonged out on that field at all last night, and lasted approximately the first half. And then, of course, Kevin O'Connell made the change coming out of the half to go back to Nick Mullins, while Mullins played a little bit better, or played better, and didn't turn the ball over. It wasn't enough to get us back into the game anyway, to make something out of it. It just, from the get-go, this team did not look like it was ready to play, didn't look like it wanted to play last night. It looked like they were all worried about where they were going to go to celebrate New Year's last night instead of having to worry about playing a football game. I don't know what's happened to the defense the last 3 weeks, but the defense, that we were lauding as being such, we were top 5 in scoring, we were top 10 in this and top. We've given up 77 points in the last 3 games now. So the defense has fallen off a cliff. Now, some of this is injuries, but, that fourth quarter of the Bengals game kind of put a blueprint out there for how to beat the scheme Flores has been pushing out here with, you just got to start hitting the Vikings over the top, and we don't have the cornerbacks to combat that. I mean, our best cornerback, Byron Murphy, has been, of course, out for the last couple of weeks, so there's a little bit of a struggle there. Caleb Evans, who had played well for a very good portion of the season, has looked extremely outmatched the last 3 weeks. Mekhi Blackman is making big-time rookie mistakes in coverage. Even the guys, Harrison Smith, Cam Bynum, Josh Metellus, guys who have played extremely well all season long. They were out of position last night. There was, we weren't getting any pressure on the blitzing. We weren't, DJ Wadham going out did not help at all. KOC didn't do Hall any favors, get him in rhythm. Problem is with Jaren Hall, when he started off, he had more completions to Green Bay than he had to the Vikings through the first quarter or quarter and a half, whatever it was. He was 0 for 5 with an interception. And then, he hit those couple of plays in a row to Addison and Jefferson, got a little bit, going up to the point where we got in to get that field goal. But, Jaren Hall even said when they interviewed him afterwards, he said if he was O'Connell, he'd have benched him. He'd have benched himself too. So seems to have been lost among the Fire KOC talk. He hasn't helped much lately. No, it hasn't, Doc, and that's been concerning. I don't know that, what the deal is. If it's just, the other or opposition starting to figure out Flores' scheme. Is it injuries? Is it, going up against better offenses? We went up against Jake Browning in Cincinnati, who has been overmatched the last 2 weeks and looked like gangbusters, and was overmatched against us for 3 quarters, and then came out that 1 quarter and pulled the win out over there against us there. But Jaren Hall last night, he didn't look like he was ready. I don't know if it was the bright lights, the Sunday Night Football primetime stuff that got overwhelmed by, or what it was. But it's not that there was a lot of tape on him that Green Bay knew it was going. Mateo here. Good evening. What do you got for the fact? Quasi has 2 drafts. He had to draft 1 good defensive player. He doesn't get credit for pace because he wasn't drafted. There is a little bit there. Of course, Lewis Cine. Well, it was actually to a point last night. Lewis Cine actually got on the field at the end of the game for a while. I don't know how many snaps he played, but he was on the field. I did see him out there at one point. Booth looked okay, not great. Evans has struggled the last couple of weeks. Blackman making rookie mistakes, like I said. Other than that, on the defensive side of things, Ja'Kalen Roy was hurt, so he wasn't playing. He's looked okay in spot stuff, nothing really that's standing out, but otherwise, other guys on the defense hasn't really been much. Asamoah hasn't seen the field hardly at all this year, which is kind of surprising. So, maybe there is something to a little bit of that. All out tanking. I don't know. Getting all those players to tank is very hard for me to wrap my head around. The coaches can put the team in a position to where, you're not putting the best game plan together in order for these guys to succeed. And by that, quiet tanking or whatever the term is they're calling it now. Doesn't help. KOC is overrated and it isn't the mastermind most Vikings fan want to crown him as. I'm not ready to throw in the towel on KOC yet. I think there's stuff there. There absolutely is. I know I saw stuff last night. The KOC is losing the locker room already and this, that, and everything else. I don't think that's the case. I think there's a lot of frustration in that locker room because of how they, 13-4 last year and then coming to where they're at this year. It's a culmination of things, the injuries this year. If we didn't have the injuries this year that we did, this team would be playing for the number 1 seed. I fully believe that. If Cousins hadn't gotten hurt, we beat Chicago. We beat Denver. We probably beat Cincinnati. We'd be sitting at 11-5 right now, 11-6, whatever it is, 11-5 with 1 game to go at the worst. Sports Talk Network, good evening. Terrible. Every receiver was wide open. Yeah, there was a lot of times I saw last night where, and I think that's part of the reason too why Hall got benched when he did, was there were receivers running up. I mean, the Packers were on backup cornerbacks at both outside corners because they're, of course, Jair Alexander was suspended, and then their other starting corner was out due to injury. Blackman's built like a 10th grader. Can't expect him to do anything against grown men at wide receiver. I still think there's something there with Blackman. He's got potential. He's got to put on a little bit of muscle, get a little bit bigger, and he's got to not make the kind of mistakes that he's been making the last few weeks. That's one thing that definitely has to change. Never was a KOC guy. Mr. Tushbush with a weak center with a bad back, and then the quarterback with a bad back. Yeah, that Tushbush thing a couple weeks ago. Yeah, I'm still questioning that as well. But that's a very valid point with a weak center. I think center is although Garrett Bradbury has played fairly well this year, considering, I think we need to start looking at trying to find some more beef to put in that center. Like I said, Bradbury's undersized. He always has been. And you get those big defensive linemen like your Kenny Clarks, like your Dexter Lawrence's, those guys like that come up through the middle out there, and they can just overpower him just because he is undersized and a little under strength. But turnovers killed us. Again, we lost the turnover battle 2-1 last night. Not the full reason why we lost the game. I mean, there was a lot of other stuff. Literally started off 0-3 when healthy. Yeah, there is that. But after that 0-3, we were turning things around in the middle of that season. And, right there before Kirk was getting hurt, Kirk was playing at an MVP level. He absolutely was. And this team was starting to click. If we had Justin Jefferson back and Jordan Addison with Kirk throwing him the ball, this team would have been in a lot better condition than where we currently sit. Bradbury gave up 7 pressures this year, which isn't bad. But it's still, he's undersized, and I've never been a huge Garrett Bradbury guy. He's, like I said, he's played better the last couple of years, but I still think there's a spot to improve. Hey, Chuck, good evening. Last night showed how many holes we have to address for 24. Let's stop this competitive rebuild label just to sell seats. Yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, showed last night we only have one pass rusher right now, and he's not under contract. I think, there's a possibility. I hope they try to bring Danielle Hunter back. I really do, because Bradbury gave up 7 pressures in that game. Yeah, that would make that's a little more than I thought he did. But yeah, it wasn't a great night for the offensive line. Darisaw got beat a couple of times. Preston Smith, I know, got him on that one. Somebody else burned him really bad on the other side too. So it's almost like this. I don't know if the whole deal with the injuries and everything just is kind of war on everybody and they've thrown in the towel. I hope that's not the case, because the season's not over. You don't quit on the season, even if you're not going to get anywhere. I mean, this team controlled their own destiny to get into the playoffs. If that's not enough motivation to keep playing and playing hard and trying to win games, then I really don't want you on this team anyway. I mean, you saw some of the guys on the sidelines afterwards. Justin Jefferson was absolutely just pissed. You could see he was pissed off. Harrison Smith was matter in hell. He was throwing his helmet and stuff on the sidelines. You normally don't see that kind of stuff out of him. There was guys out there that acted like they cared. I mean, Jefferson did everything he could last night. Jordan Addison played a pretty decent game as best he could. And not having Hawkinson hurt, obviously, but still, it was just one of those things last night that, us as Vikings fans, we tend to see these games every time, once a year, usually at the most inopportune time. And, last night was just that time. Seems like Hunter doesn't show up in big games. I'm not sure about that so much. He didn't do a whole lot last night, but they were double teaming him most of the night too, because they weren't concerned with Patrick Jones coming off the other side. There was that one play I know where they lined him up inside and had him come right up over the center and got in and got pressure. I don't know. I didn't look at the box score to know if we actually got any sacks on Love last night, but we seemed like the pressure wasn't getting home like it needed to be. And you gave him time to sit back there, and then he was able to pick us apart by throwing deep. That's been the recipe I think that got figured out, against the Vikings defense. I talked about that a little bit ago. You go deep on them, our cornerbacks can't cover. And that's a problem that needs to be addressed. And as many times as we have drafted cornerbacks over the last 6-8 years, you'd think that we had something in there, but we're still at a point where cornerback is something that's going to have to be addressed this year. I would hope maybe that we, instead of trying to find a guy in the draft, we go sign a free agent that's, worth a damn, that we can put in there that can help out, instead of having all these young kids back there that don't have the experience. There's a lot of, like Chuck said a few minutes ago, there is a lot of holes on this team that we need to fill next year. We need a quarterback. Are we going to bring Kirk back? Or I think the last month or so has shown that the Vikings quarterback of the future is not currently on the active roster. Nick Mullins is a backup at best. Jaren Hall is showing he's nowhere near ready to even consider giving him a starting job. I mean, Jaren Hall has a lot to prove to even get up beyond Kellen Mond territory at the moment. He sure looked like he didn't know what he was, didn't belong out there last night. That was the biggest thing. And like I said, everybody said we had to see what we have in Jaren Hall. Now we know what we have in Jaren Hall, and it's not anything that can be sustainable for quarterback play for the, in the National Football League at this moment. Can he turn into something in a long term? Sure he can. But Jaren Hall is who he is. He is a 5th round developmental quarterback that the Vikings picked to hopefully develop into a backup quarterback. That was expectations for him. If he could turn into something more than that, fantastic. You either have a very good backup quarterback or you have a valuable trade piece down the road. But we're not at that point right now. They will bring Kirk back next year. I hate to say it. James, I think there's probably a pretty decent chance that happens. It's all going to come down to, is Kirk going to play ball as far as contract? I'm guessing they're not going to want to do more than 1 to 2 year deal. Will Kirk want to do that? And what kind of money is he going to looking for? If you can sign him for 30 to 35 million a year, then yeah. If he's going to be looking at 40 to 45 plus, you're not going to be able to, because you have to try to sign Danielle Hunter back. You have to get Justin Jefferson signed, because Jefferson needs to be signed before the season next year, because he's going to be going into that 5th year option year, and you need to have a long-term contract signed for him. Now, Is the frustrations over the last few weeks going to play a part in that? I think it's going to. I think Justin Jefferson's going to want to know what the future or the direction that the Vikings are going to go at quarterback before he signs that deal. Part of that, I think this is a kind of a come back to bite him in the ass a little bit kind of thing, that they did not get Jefferson signed before this season. I think it would have been advantageous for them to do that. They didn't get it done. But I think as it sits right now, I would say the odds of Kirk coming back are probably in that 40% range. I don't know that it's a 50-50 shot that he comes back. I mean, Kirk's value is going to be reduced a little bit because he's coming off that Achilles injury, and he's going to be 36 years old before the season starts. Yeah, he's got a couple of years left in him, most likely. Can he play to 40? I don't know. But even if you bring Kirk back, you got to look at the long-term future, and that's going to mean drafting a quarterback in April. And it's going to mean drafting a quarterback early. We can't do this, hang around and hope somebody falls to us, or wait till the second or third round or mid rounds to draft a quarterback. No, you're going to have to go get your guy early in the first round, depending upon where we end up in the draft. I think we're sitting at like 12th right now. If we lose next week, we're most likely picking inside the top 10. You get up in there, you can go up and get a Drake May or a Jaden Daniels, if those are the guys that you want. Caleb Williams, if you're on that train. I personally am not, but it's kind of sounding like Chicago is leaning towards staying with Justin Fields next year, so they probably don't take a quarterback with that number 1 overall pick. So that either they trade it for a king's ransom to somebody who wants to go up there and get that number 1, or they take a Marvin Harrison Jr. or somebody like that, and that shifts the quarterbacks down a slot. Problem is, you've got a lot of teams down there that are very much in need of a quarterback. You've got the Washington Commanders, who don't seem to be sold on Sam Howell. Probably are going to have a new head coach there. You got New England Patriots, who definitely are not sold on Mac Jones. Probably going to have a new head coach there as well. Atlanta's going to be up in that mix. New Orleans possibly. Denver most likely now after the whole Russell Wilson thing going on. So it's going to be a seller's market as far as those top few picks to have to trade up to get it. But you got to do what you got to do to get your quarterback. You can't just sit around with your thumb up your backside and hope that the guy falls to you. Hey, Dave, good evening. So it's going to be interesting to see, come draft time. I think we have 24 free agents on this team that may or may not be here next year. So, there's going to be half a roster where the turnover potentially between this year and next year on players that have expiring contracts anyway. So there's going to be a lot of looking into that stuff to see what you can do. I mean, some of these guys are depth guys that they'll probably bring back on fairly cheap contracts, but you've got, a few guys that are higher up the rung on the ladder that aren't, probably not going to be here next year. You've got Jordan Hicks. You've got Harrison Smith, that very likely has played his last game at home in purple anyway. He's not a free agent, but they saved like $12 million by releasing him. So I think that's probably a likely scenario. Harrison Smith very likely could retire at the end of this year. Wouldn't surprise me one bit to see that happen. Offensive line, you got a lot of guys there. I think Dalton Reisner has proven that he's worth bringing back, and I hope they do bring him back. I think he wants to be here. So that's a case there. A lot of the backups I know are expiring. Chris Reed, Oli Udo, who was out most of the year anyway. I think Brandel, I believe, is expiring. So there's a lot of players there. There's on the defensive side of things, there's a lot of guys that are going on there. So this is going to be a different team next year. I hate to be sitting here with a week left in the season saying or talking about what the team's going to look like next year, because the season's not over yet for all intents and purposes. I mean, as far as playoffs and stuff, it's over. There is the one scenario where the Vikings could still sneak into the playoffs. They would have to beat Detroit this weekend, then have Green Bay, Seattle, and New Orleans lose. Then they would still sneak in as the 7 seed. I don't see that happening. I mean, we've had the golden opportunity for the last 4 weeks now to stamp our ticket to the playoffs, and we haven't done it. So 3% chance, is that where we're sitting at right now? Yeah, I have a better chance, I believe, of hitting the Powerball on that lottery ticket I bought this afternoon than the Vikings do of making it into the playoffs at this point in time. Stranger things have happened, I guess, but I think, like the tag on the video said, you can pretty much stick a fork in the season. It's done. Am I going to cheer for us to lose next week? No. Is it probably best if we do lose next week? Yeah. At this point, it is. I can't actively cheer for the team to lose a game. But I'm not going to be heartbroken if we do lose. I guess we'll put it that way. Last night we had basically a prime opportunity. We could have knocked Green Bay out of the playoffs, but we failed to do that. Now they stand a good chance of getting in there. If Seattle loses and Green Bay wins, Green Bay's in the playoffs. And that the Vikings potentially have an opportunity to go from being the division champs last year to being the worst team in the division this year, because Chicago coming on, if Chicago beats Green Bay, we end up being 4th in the NFC North. And that is something that almost didn't seem possible a month ago. We were talking about the opportunity to win the NFC North, and now all of a sudden we're going to be the worst team in the NFC North. It just shows how quickly things can change and how weird this 2023 season has been in the NFL. Shouldn't play our starters. Well, on the plus side of that, half of our starters are hurt, so we're not playing them anyway, but Justin Jefferson's going to play. Addison's going to play. All the linemen are going to – they're not going to sit people. I would be very surprised if they do anyway. Throwing in the towel at the end of the season. Now, depending upon who they start at quarterback, that could be throwing in the towel without technically throwing in the towel. Kevin O'Connell said today that he knows who he's going to have it start next week. He wasn't ready to announce it today because he wants to talk to the players and all that other stuff first. The rumors I've been hearing coming out from a couple of different places is that they're going to let Jaren Hall start again next week. Is that an opportunity for him to one last chance to see that if he's got anything? Yeah, and at this point, it doesn't really matter to me who they start at quarterback. They can start Hall. They can start Mullins. They can bring Josh Dobbs back in and start for all I care at this point in time. It doesn't matter. That was exactly my point there, Mark. Good evening, by the way. Vikes are playing poorly lately, missing key pieces. They don't have to lose on purpose. It's happening naturally. I say the biggest thing this weekend is Detroit doesn't have a whole lot to play for either, because it's going to be. I think it's going to be tough for them to move up to the 2 seed. Depending, I have to look at the schedule to see when Detroit plays compared to Dallas when Dallas plays, because if there is an option for them to try to get to the 2, then Detroit will have something to play for, I guess, which means they won't be resting players against us. Collinsworth said Green Bay would be a dangerous team if they get in the playoffs. Chris Collinsworth, I'm pretty sure, had to go get an entire case of chapstick last night, because all he did the entire game was perform verbal fellatio on Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers. I mean, I was watching the game with my family. My mother and my sister are Packers fans, and they were sitting there shaking their heads. They were disgusted in how Collinsworth was just slobbering all over Jordan Love last night. It was pathetic. Didn't really expect anything less than Collinsworth from Collinsworth, because that's just kind of what he does. He's always had a hard on for the Green Bay Packers for some reason or another. I don't know why, but he's spent the last 12 years or whatever it is drooling over Aaron Rodgers, and now he just switched right over to Jordan Love and doing the same thing. So kind of is what it is at this point. I don't expect anything from the national media on anything usually when the Vikings are concerned. Detroit won't rest even if they could. They want to abuse somebody after Saturday's debacle. Yeah, you're probably right there, Dave. You don't really want to go into the playoffs on a 2-game losing streak. And they're going to come in pissed off because of the ending of their Dallas game, and that they were wronged. They're perceived as being wronged, whether it was or whether it wasn't. Personally, I think it was the correct. It may have been the incorrect call, but there was a penalty on that play regardless. I don't know which guy got the which one actually reported and which one didn't, but regardless, you had one of them were lined up, so it was an illegal formation anyway, so it wouldn't have counted or shouldn't have counted either way. It was a cluster, but Detroit game is at 1 next week. Dallas is at 4. So then that gives Detroit something to play for, because if they beat us, then Dallas has to win in the late game. So I look for Detroit to come out and try to get that win. And like Dave said, they want to get that sour taste out of their mouth. They want to go into the playoffs on a high note with a win, and beating your division rival and knocking them down always helps in that case. So, I don't see it being an easy trek to the Vikings for a win on Sunday. But, of course, as we talk about the most Vikings things ever, it would not surprise me one bit to see Minnesota go into Detroit, win that game, and basically cost ourselves a couple of draft spots by doing so. Now, like I said, I'm not cheering for the Vikings to go in there and actively try to lose that game, but it's probably beneficial in the long run if we do. But it is what it is. couple of silver linings, I guess, last night. Theo Jackson on the special teams. That kid played a hell of a game last night. I mean, he had the highlight of the night with that hit with the muff punt that he recovered down there when the Vikings actually got their touchdown. Got lucky on the previous punt where he had already committed to the tackle, and then the fair catch was waived and could have been called a penalty. I think the refs got it right that they, because he was already in the air by the time the fair catch wave went up. So, but he looked like he wanted to play, and that's the thing I want to see this week against Detroit more than anything is who on this field still is giving it their all, is actively playing, who wants to play, and who's out there who's packed it in already and doesn't give a shit anymore. Because if you packed it in, you don't give a shit. I don't know that I really am all that thrilled with you being on my team. If you're out there, if you're trying hard, trying to win, giving it your best to try to win the game, that's all you can ask for at this point in time. Steven, yep, that's exactly what I was talking about before. Don't need to win this game. It's more beneficial to the team if we do lose it. Like I said, they're not going to go out there and actively try to lose it, I don't think. That doesn't send a good message to the locker room, and that locker room is kind of tense right now as it is because there's a lot of frustration. We saw it at the end of the game last night when that pushing and shoving match started at the end. I know Booth had said that the Packers players were talking shit and basically trying to get under their skin at the end of the game, and it worked, and they had a fight. But it's one more game, and then there's a long off season, which basically is going to start by 4:00 next Sunday. We will be looking at the off season. There's going to be a ton of stuff that we have to figure out. Who's going to be on this team? Who's not going to be on this team? Who can we re-sign? Who are we going to draft? There's going to be a lot of holes. And, that's a lot of stuff that we're going to talk about in the off season on the different shows that we've got. Going to be a lot of breakdown on that stuff because let's face it, this team needs help. There's a lot of talent on this team, and if they can get it together and people can stay healthy, it won't take much to get this thing turned back around again and to be competitive and heading back towards that spot that we want to be. But they're going to have to roll up their sleeves. They're going to have to do some work with this team because, as we saw, things kind of fell apart the last month of the season. Now, a lot of that was to do with the quarterback situation, of course, but the defense as well. Is Flores going to be back next year? I know our buddy Ted Glover had made mention in one of our Facebook groups that we have that if the season had ended after the Raiders game, Flores would have been probably the hottest name out there as far as head coaching candidates. But now after the last 3 weeks, I think that's probably cooled off some. And, I would tend to agree with Ted on that. I think it's a little more likely that Flores comes back this year now. Haven't really heard a ton of buzz about anybody, necessarily looking at him except maybe the Patriots. I could see the Patriots. I mean, they're going to have to go to, get a quarterback. Brian Flores isn't much of working with a young quarterback kind of guy. We kind of saw that when he was in Miami with Tua. So and Bill Belichick being a defensive-minded guy that's been there for the last 20 years, I can see them going with an offensive-minded coach over there anyway. So we'll see what happens there too. But the coaching staff, there's going to be some shakeups. There needs to be some shakeups. The team's going to look a lot different, like I said. But Anyway, we've been going on about 40 minutes tonight. It's New Year's Eve. I don't have a whole lot more to talk about. We beat this thing last two, like a dead horse the last few weeks. You guys got anything else in the chat you want to talk about? Throw your questions out there and we'll hit them here before we call it a night. If you haven't done so, hit that like button as well. Helps us out a ton. Helps drive the numbers up. Helps us make more and better content for you guys. Chuck, good question here. Does O'Connell have to win next year with minimum wild card? I think it's too early to tell on that yet. If Kirk Cousins is back and is the starting quarterback next year, I think then the expectations become much higher, and I think that's a very strong possibility. If we end up starting a rookie, I think then the leash is going to, there won't be much of a hot seat next year because you're going to have to give a rookie quarterback, a year or two to develop. O'Connell's seat's not hot this year at all because of all the crap we've gone through with the injuries and all that other stuff. They're not going to fire him after that. I fully expect to see Kevin O'Connell get his full 4 years. Him and Quasey are both on 4-year contracts. They've gone through 2 years. They've got 2 left. If they by the end of next year can't show progress in this competitive rebuild thing that they've been trying to do, I think then both of their seats start getting a little bit warm. But beyond that, unless the wheels completely fall off next year, kind of like the last half of this season did, and we have, the veteran talent leadership on this team, and we still go that route, I think then his seat will get warm. But, we'll have a better handle on it when we get to training camp. We know who we've got on this team. Who's the quarterback is probably question number one. Who do we have for pass rushers is probably the B topic. Who do we have as secondary guys is right up there too. KOC's seat will be warm next year. It's possible. I guess I don't see it right now, but I can't make that determination until we know, what we're dealing with from a roster standpoint for next year. But anyway, I think with that, going to call it a night here and go watch some college football semifinals. I think Michigan and Alabama are still playing. Washington and Texas are later on here, so go keep an eye on that for a little bit. But want to thank you again, everybody, for watching, for joining us on a New Year's night here, 2024. And, not the way the season we wanted to see the season end. Michigan up 27-20 in overtime. Thank you for the update. Sorry, I've been outside doing some bunch of work. I was starting to do a little cold, but it wasn't not the way we expected to see the season end. Disappointing. Again, that's the life of a Vikings fan. But again, want to thank all you guys for watching. Programming note. We intend to have Brunswick's Best back this week on Wednesday. Lance will be looking at those two wear number 30. And then, excuse me, we should have live studio show this Friday at 6 p.m. to preview the final game of the regular season against the Detroit Lions. We'll know who the quarterback is by that time. We'll know a few other things. And we'll talk about all that and whatever else comes up during the week. So, again, thank you guys for watching. Shout out to Noi, BB, Jen, Wilma, Nympha, the Filipino fan club across the pond over there watching. Hey, Sarah, good evening. Excited for the top 10 pick. Yeah, we're not there yet. I think we're 12 right now. So we have a little work to do if we want that one too. but we'll see. Yeah, there again by this time next week, we will know where the Vikings are picking in the 2024 draft. So we'll be able to talk about that as well. So again, thank you everybody for watching. And with that, we will see you on Wednesday for Brunswick's Best and also on Friday for the regular studio show. So you guys have a great rest of your week. Happy New Year again, everybody. And we'll see you soon.